Really excited to talk to you. We've been connected online for quite a while and have met in person, and I've read your books for a long time.
Oh,
Um,
and we're both members in good standing of the Medical Shitstorm Club.
yeah, we've had our trials, haven't we?
Oh, yeah.
All right. How big of a role did short story writing play for you?
Um, at first, it was really a challenge. I didn't think that I was wired for short stories, and I blame long years of running role playing games for that because you always got to have the next adventure ready. It's an ongoing campaign.
Right.
So the idea of doing something encapsulated was more of a challenge to me in my writing. Even now, I find myself putting in little hooks for where it might go next. So it's been a good challenge though. I've enjoyed, you know, taking it on and seeing if I could do it.
Do you have any idea how many short stories you've written?
Oh, I know I've got over 100 in print in various anthologies and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then depends on whether you count Smut on Literotica and a whole lot of fanfic from back in the day. So,
So you kind of have some interesting influences talking about the role playing games and that sort of like impromptu rolling story style that you get there, and then like you said, doing fan fiction and some things like that too. Has that impacted the way that you kind of wrap your brain around a story that you write and publish now?
oh, definitely. I think the fan fiction people like to nag on it all the time, but for me, especially with like a themed anthology call, um, or some homage or mashup type project, I'm I've trained myself for that. I'm used to stepping into somebody else's fictional world and playing with their toys. That's a big part of how and why Lake House Infernal happened because it's basically just Edward Lee fanfic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now I and probably several other readers and peers would probably place you firmly in the extreme horror um, category. Was that kind of where you gravitated all along, or was that a more recent evolution of you as a writer?
I think it's always where I was supposed to be, but for a long time I wasn't seeing it in other published books, and then I got a hold of Richard Lehman's One Rainy Night,
Mm-hmm.
and that for me was just a moment, an epiphany. Wait, we can do this? We can write this kind of nasty, horrible stuff? I'm in. I'm so in. And while I do enjoy many other styles as well, yeah, that, just trashy, nasty, horrible stuff is where I feel really comfortable. I'm not sure what that says about me as a person, but there you go.
That's wonderful. How big of a deal was it for you to win the Splatterpunk Award?
Oh boy, anybody who saw the award ceremony, I completely fell apart into a blubbering wreck. Um, I think I'm pretty sure Brian Keene got a huge kick out of that.
Well, a lot of people were happy for you for sure.
I it was and is well. Here, let me reach out for a second, and I finally got my trophy.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it really it was and is still. I can still hardly believe it. An honor, a thrill, a validation
Mm-hmm.
that, warped as I am, I must be doing something that other warped people are getting a kick out of. So yeah, that for me, I don't know if any other award that I might ever win in the future would come close to that. And that was just, you know, my people where my heart belongs, and just the most wonderful feeling.
That is awesome. It was a cool night, and it was interesting, of course, because KillerCon, where that award ceremony takes place, of course, was virtual last year and will be again this year.
Yeah.
So it was what was normally like a small room of people that usually get to see that. It was open to more people, but then, like you said, you had to wait for it to get mailed to you and a number of other things like that. We've mentioned your family a couple times here. Do they do they get into or explore the kind of stuff you're writing very often?
Oh boy. Well, let's see. My family, I'm definitely from the weird branch of the family tree.
Okay.
Um, and we're all kind of peculiar in different ways.
That's nice.
My dad is a diehard Civil War reenactor. So it was a long time before I wrote anything he was really interested in reading.
Hmm.
The first one was a short story called Little Johnny Jump Up that was in the Snafu anthology.
Okay.
And it was about it was set during the Civil War, about a group of soldiers with a haunted cannon. That was the first thing of mine that really clicked with Dad. Though he has also since read The Night Silver River Run Red,
Uh huh.
which, is not the sort of thing that most people would want their parents to read, given some of its content. But he said he really liked it, so my mom, um, she's always been a big reader, and I think I quoted her during my Splatterpunk acceptance speech that when I had told her I was nominated, she said, "I always knew you were talented and weird." Um, my sister, she likes to pass for normal, but she's got some freakiness in there, I know. And she's currently after me to write the sequel to Murder Girls.
Okay.
And then there's my daughter Becca, poor long suffering Becca, who has had to grow up with me for a mother. It gives her an edge whenever she and her friends play, "Well, my parents were so screwed up." Because yeah, again, being able to bring out a copy of Spermjackers from Hell, it's like, my mom wrote this. It's like, oh, she wins. But she's a trooper. I'm so proud of her. And she just graduated with her master's degree in stage management and prop design.
Oh wow.
She wants to go into the building and designing escape rooms business. So yeah, she's weird too, and I love her to death.
Now, I've written a number of different genres, and my dad, growing up, he liked sci-fi and he liked fantasy, but he was really into westerns, and it was never something that I much enjoyed as a kid, the shows or the books. And some of the first westerns I wrote were kind of cross-genre stuff, and then I wrote a few short stories that were kind of straight westerns. When we look at something like The Night Silver River Run Red, was your dad into westerns, like normal westerns, before he picked up your book?
He was even before the Civil War stuff. He was always like dragging us on vacation to Calico Ghost Town and places like that. So, and he had the Time Life Western books.
Yeah.
So it was kind of always there in the background. And I'd written a few other Western horror type things before because I'm I'm really into exploring historical eras. Partly because I'm lazy and technophobic and can't keep up with the modern era, so it's a lot easier for me to be able to go back to Viking times or the Old West or ancient Rome
Hmm.
than it is to try and hassle my way through, cell phones and all that. Um, so yeah, he was into that. It was familiar to me, um, and it was just again with the different eras and settings. It's a chance for me to play with language,
Hmm.
which is I think what at the core I'm really all about. The language, the dialogue, the setting, the feel and flavor of it all.
Hmm.
That's what does it for me.
I've been a very outspoken fan of the splatter westerns that Death's Head Press has done, and Lake Infernal was great, and obviously it won the award. Uh, but there's part of me that feels like the Night Silver River Run Red was probably one of the best showcases of your talent because I picked up I was picking up your short stories earlier on, and I really didn't have a feel for how many of those you were writing in comparison to novels and that sort of thing, and I always felt like that what you produced in the short stories was really sharp and unique, and I was always waiting to see, okay, is there a novel that she can do this in, like a longer work, and like I said, Lake House Infernal was great, but I really felt like that the Night Silver River Run Red was just that moment where all of it kind of blew out. Like this is the thing I could hand somebody and say, okay, this is what Christine Morgan can do.
Thank you.
Did you feel like you had accomplished something bigger with that novel, or was it just kind of like, like other stories to you?
I was just having so much fun that I really wasn't even thinking beyond that. My usual method is to come up with a bunch of characters, throw them in a situation, and see what happens. I don't plot very well, so
Right.
I'm usually along for the ride right there with them. I went into Silver River and it was like, well, I want to have, this traveling sideshow, and I want to have these kids and the outlaws, and I want some weird cult up in the mountains that, and I just want to throw it all together and see what happens.
Hmm.
And it was just such a blast. I mean, so much of it was so wrong, really, really wrong. Um, but I had such a great time that I would have at the time I wrote it, Death's Head Press actually had a word limit
Hmm.
for the westerns. So I could have gone on longer, but I knew I had to stay to the word limit. Then, Christopher Triana comes swaggering in and blows that all.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I really just that whole little universe there. I want to go back to it. I have more ideas and titles in mind for following up with those characters.
I can't wait for that. At the end of it, did you feel like you had something special? Like once you looked at it, once it was completed, did it feel like you'd really accomplished something with it?
It did. I got to the end and it all fell together, and I was sitting there thinking, this seems like I actually did it on purpose. Somebody working in the back of my head actually, has a plan and knows what they're doing, and it came together. And similar thing happened with Trenchmouth.
Hmm.
I had a bunch of characters in a situation, threw them all in there, and then by the end of it, it was like, yeah, there actually was a method to my madness after all.
Now I got the opportunity to read Trenchmouth ahead of time because John sent it to me when we set up this interview. So I think sometimes I just interview people just so I can steal books early, but it
Oh, hey,
worked out fine
I,
here.
I, I reviewed for the horror fiction review for 15 years on
Yeah, yeah.
that momentum, yeah. So
Now
yeah, what do you think? Because I know not many people have had the chance to read
I
it
like
yet.
it. I like it, and again, it feels like you went into new territory. Now, of course, your voice is your voice. I think it's always there.
Yeah,
Um, but there were a number of aspects about that novel where I felt like you were doing something new. And of course, there's a ton of these kind of like water monster type stories that are out there now. It has an audience, which is obviously why people keep publishing them.
I
But I
love
felt
those.
like you were putting sort of your Christine Morgan twist on things. Like there were moments where I kind of felt like, okay, she's doing this on purpose. There's the normal way this can go, and she just doesn't like that. She's just going to twist it a little bit and see what different direction it can go. So I really did enjoy it. Um, you dedicated it to Jeff Burke. For those who don't know, can you tell who Jeff Burke is and why he's important to you?
Jeff is one of my favorite people of all time. Um, when I originally started work on the book, he was still with Deadite Press, and he had said, that here was some of what he wanted to see. And to me, Jeff was the heart and soul and guts of Deadite Press. His enthusiasm, his craziness, and just his anything goes. Just make it fun, however nuts it is. That really spoke to me as a reader.
Mm-hmm.
So it became a goal to write for Deadite Press, which I achieved with Spermjackers and Lake House. But then things happened
Yeah.
with Bizarro and Deadite and all that, and Jeff was going to do his own publishing company, but it didn't quite get traction. So I wound up going with Madness Heart,
Right.
and no regrets at all. But I dedicated it to Jeff because he was the one who got me to write it. He's like, hey, I want to read some deep sea monster stuff, and I'm like, I can do that. So that was how it happened, and I will always be grateful to him for kind of nudging me in that direction. I'm sure I would have gotten there eventually because I just love that genre
Yeah.
so much. I mean, bad shark movies and all the deep sea chompies, and which I'm personally terrified of sharks and the ocean and all that. But I think that's I'm terrified of a lot of the stuff I write about, so it all works.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I believe I did see um, maybe nods or influences of some of those movies, even some of the
Oh
more
yeah.
classic ones like Jaws, but then like the Megalodon movies and others. How conscious were you of kind of pulling that, pulling those elements in?
Oh yeah. A lot of Trenchmouth was written kind of with that deliberate. I'm looking at you, trashy shark movie. I mean, there are some, and some of it is just sort of poking fun at the genre in general and at
Hmm.
writing in general. I think the scene where we're first introduced to Dr. Margot Yale, and she's standing there, at the window looking out into the depths. There's some remark about how in some hackneyed novel, the author might use this as a chance to describe what she looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of little things like that that just sort of snuck in there. Some are more subtle. Some, I mean, when I've got a whole chapter titled "Info Dump," where we're going to talk about the science and get that all out of the way, or another one titled "Montage,"
Yeah. Yeah.
the tests subjects are being experimented on. It's like, I don't want to go into all that detail. Everybody knows how that works. I think
Right.
there was also a bit with Margot that brings up they're talking about extinct prehistoric creatures, and she brings up the coelacanth because every goddamn bunny brings up the coelacanth, and she doesn't want to get into that. And so that for me, that was kind of a loving, fun poke at all those. I think she says, if I have to hear about the coelacanth one more time, I'm gonna drink bleach.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just, for me, it was again part of that fun, that loving fun.
I noticed you played with style a little bit too, in the sense like you had several moments near the beginning of the book that all kind of began with how it begins, and then you would have
Yeah,
something else, and that was repeated multiple times, and then there were I always try to be careful when I've actually read the novel that I don't give away like the best stuff, uh, but there were sort of chapters in between where you would go into the depths a little bit. So you had your kind of characters, and then you would go down and kind of show us what was going on somewhere else. And in
yeah,
those moments, you got real creative in how you sort of express the thoughts of other beings, and even in the writing, how sometimes you would shift back and forth between sort of unique narrative styles. So, did you just, when you were writing this, did you just kind of go straight through, and when you got to those chapters, you decided to do something different, or do you jump around when you're putting something together like this?
no, I wrote it pretty much in order, but I really enjoy radically different points of view and characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that also goes back to the role playing and the fanfic. But
Right.
I love being able to sit myself down and say, okay, if you were a giant squid, what would your thought process be like? What would how would it be different from a human, but still kind of relatable? I mean, the squid. There's a scene where the squid gets religion,
Yeah.
and I just love that because they're so smart, they're so clever. Here's this weird new thing in his environment. Yeah, being able to put myself in not just another person's perspective, but a completely different type of creature um, is something that I always enjoy. I love that challenge, whether it's deep sea creatures or you know elves or dragons
Right.
or demons. One of my favorite zombie stories that I wrote was all from the perspective of zombies,
Right.
but you know, more not zombies like human think of zombies that still have human traits, but like what would they be like without any of that human influence?
Right.
I really love that sort of challenge. Yeah. And another thing about Trenchmouth is I owe a huge debt to a lot of Facebook friends who gleefully offered up their names and likenesses to get, brutally killed by sea monsters and stuff in this thing's book. So
That is
yeah,
funny.
readers might notice a few familiar names
I
in there.
did. I did. I'm glad you mentioned that. I know a Freevald flew by on a page one time. I didn't know if it's not quite a common name, but we both know one. So
Yeah, yeah, no, there are several people in there to whom I owe a great debt for letting me borrow them. Uh, but yeah, I really hope everybody enjoys it even half as much as I did.
oh, I'm sure it's going to be great. Now, cosmic horror isn't necessarily something I would automatically associate with you, but when we get into like the perspective of a monster, there were times where I felt like maybe you were leaning into that a little bit, like maybe borrowing from that tradition to sort of express the monster. Am I just seeing that, or was that any part of what you were doing?
I've written a lot of cosmic horror short stories.
Mm-hmm.
Again, mostly for themed anthology calls.
Right.
Um, and I always saw a lot of similarities between, your Lovecraftian tentacled eldritch monsters and the shit that's down in the deep oceans,
Yeah.
because that shit is bonkers.
Yeah.
That it really is an entirely other world that we have barely touched and can barely comprehend. So yeah, I see a lot of similarities there.
When I'm writing novels, some areas where I struggle is in science fiction. If I need to go too hard science fiction, where I have to really understand how the stuff's working, or I write a good bit of zombie stuff and things like that, and some of those stories can move into like military type situations, and that's not a strength of mine particularly either. Now, to a degree, the science plays a big role in this book, and there's touches of a military element as well. Now, you mentioned that you're kind of a technophobe in life, and sometimes try to go back to the to genres that touch on the past as sort of a comfort area. But when you're writing something that does require you to have some understanding of evolutionary biology, or to include science babble that doesn't quite sound like babble, and maybe even some military characters and stuff like that, is what do you go to when you're trying to create that? Are you doing heavy research? Are you connected to people? Do you have a background in any of that?
Um, well, yeah, hard sci-fi and military and stuff like police procedurals. Yeah, that's all way outside my comfort zone for the very reasons you described. And I knew, that going into Trenchmouth, I wanted it to be sciency enough to be plausible.
Yeah.
Not total B movie garbage mad science
Right.
science.
Right.
Though I wanted some of that too. So I did most of my research for it was a lot of deep sea documentaries and things because I wanted to get the creatures right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for other types of details, yeah, it's like I would do research. I would talk to people if I have military or weapons questions. There's guys in the genre that I can go bug.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I'm never shy about doing that, about admitting when I don't know something and I need someone to put me on the right track here. Um, a lot of the time, if I can just kind of gloss around and slide by and cheat, I will,
Mm-hmm.
by not getting into specifics.
Right.
Um, like some of the other splatter westerns are very detailed and precise about their firearms,
Yes.
and I'm just as long as I'm not grossly wrong, grossly obviously wrong, I don't try to get too specific,
Yes.
and the more specific I try to get, the more likely I am to get it wrong.
Yes.
So I think that's kind of what I go for with the more sciencey or technologically advanced stuff. It's like if I can skate just close enough to where it sounds like I actually know what I'm talking about, then no nobody has to be any the wiser. Even though everyone who knows me knows that I have a flip phone under duress, and, and the time my sister and I rented a car and it came with a fob but no key, I didn't know how to cope. So
Yeah.
in the books, it's like I'll try to fake it and skate by, but yeah, everybody who knows me knows the real.
I think
That's not my thing.
I think you and I are kindred spirits on a lot of those things. Uh, Now, one thing I didn't know how I was going to bring it up, but you kind of touched on it here. As crazy as the book gets, so like some of the stuff that happens, maybe like what you would call second act and definitely third act. Um, I I felt like as I was reading through that it was really grounded. So like you talked about, putting in just enough of the science, just enough of the other stuff. As crazy and meta as some of the dialogue got and some of the other things like that, I also felt like that underneath it was sort of this grounded story that was connected into reality in a way that maybe even some of your short stories and some of the other longer works that you've written didn't try to hold on too tight to. So, some of the stuff you've written, is demonic crazy, where
Yeah.
reality is very, very thin. But here, I guess what I'm saying is, even with all the craziness that happened in this novel, reality felt very thick compared to, some of the other worlds you explore in your work. Was there a conscious choice to kind of almost ground this in a way that maybe some of your other stories hadn't been?
In a way, but at the same time, you know, I never specifically give a location
Yes.
or a date. And I do that a lot too. I did that with Silver River. I have vague ideas of where and when
Mm-hmm.
it might be set, but again, that's another way of cheating. I don't want to
Yeah.
lock myself
Yeah.
in and then have somebody come along and go, "Hey, this wasn't around at that time, or this
Right.
didn't happen until so many years later." Um, but I wanted it to, to feel like our familiar world to the reader. And I think what what really helps with that is the characters and the relationships, the conversations, the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as messed up as they are, you kind of get the idea that these are real people.
Right. Right.
You can go to Taco Tuesday with them, and um, just and little things about them, like the marine biologist who wears all the silly T-shirts and has the light up anglerfish slippers.
Yeah.
I just want them to be regular people, but not average, mundane, boring people, because
Right.
everybody I know is quirky and weird in some way, and I wanted to, you know, kind of shout that out to them and bring up some problems that people face, and just again, see what happens. But
Right.
I really think that they're they're relatable people, even screwed up as they may be. If you aren't someone like that, you probably know someone like that.
Yes. Yes. Looking through your work, one impression I got from this was that it was a bit of a departure from exactly the kind of things you've done before. But I felt that way before reading your stuff. So if we run through kind of the examples we have here, Lake House Infernal, you know, did what it did and won the award. Then, like I said, the night Silver River Run Red, I felt like you went to different places and I felt like you created something unique there. And then we get to Trenchmouth, and again, I felt that there was a departure where you made a novel that you hadn't written before. How much of a conscious choice is it for you to sort of write the work you do that's different from what other people are doing, and then also to write things that are different from what you've done before? How much of that goes into your process and your thinking as you do the next thing?
Mostly it's what kind of fun can I have with this? What kind of twist can I do? What kind of approach can I take that I maybe haven't seen a lot before? Um, because yeah, they say that thing about how there's only so many stories and
Right.
it's all in how you do it. Um, but yeah, and prior to these, I have several other more mainstream-ish horror novels and
Mm-hmm.
some more oddball kind of things. It's all really, for me, it all comes down to, you know what what might be fun to play with?
Um, Kind of looking ahead, is there something you have coming out in the future, or something you're working on now that you can tell us about, or do we need to keep that
Yeah.
under wraps at this point?
Well, speaking of departures, um, the next one, um, well, Trenchmouth is coming out next week.
Okay.
I've also got one called Birthright that was supposed to be out earlier this year, but things get delayed.
Yeah.
And it was written. It has kind of a difficult past. It was written several years ago, accepted, published for one day. The publisher died, the company got
Oh my
dissolved, the
lord.
book went back into limbo, and it was kind of a hard genre to pigeonhole in the first place.
Yes.
So it sort of, rattled around for a few years. Um, and even now, I'm not quite sure how to categorize it, but it's because it's kind of dark fantasy, paranormal-ish,
Okay.
horror-ish. There are some elements of romance, but it's about a widowed single mom who gets contacted out of the blue by the father-in-law she thought was dead because the family never talks about him. And he invites her to, bring the kids out to visit. And this, again, ties kind of back to my dad because the father-in-law is a living history, Renaissance fair,
Mm-hmm.
Arthurian type who lives in this castle at this village out on the island where the people really do, try and live like it is in medieval times. And then they have tourists come in and all that. But then there's this whole darker, evil, hidden secret aspect going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, genre-wise, it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that one should be out fairly soon. I've got a couple more collections
Oh, cool.
that are due to come out eventually.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, one is steampunk-ish,
Oh, wow.
um, kind of part steampunk, part P.G. Woodhouse, part Downton Abbey.
Okay. Yeah.
I've done several stories kind of in that setting as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is my, a bunch of my more historical, from like prehistoric, ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, Mesoamerica, you know, early culture kind of horror.
Mm-hmm.
And as for working on, I am currently about 2/3 of the way through Warlock Infernal,
Oh, okay.
which is the sequel to Lake House Infernal.
Nice.
And it, again, I had hoped to be done by now, but life got in the way,
Right.
and I wound up, moving out of state and quitting my job and all that. But I'm back to it now, and again, really having such a great time with it that whatever happens with it, I'm just loving the journey.
That's good. Um, what's usually your time frame on writing a longer piece, like a novella or novel? Like, are we talking like a 2 or 3 year average, or what's usual for you?
Not usually, no. Um, I think Silver River I did in about 6 weeks.
Okay.
Um, it's kind of hard to average them out over the past few years, especially because I was halfway into Lake House Infernal when I had my cancer surgery,
Right.
so that put everything on hold.
Right.
But in general, if all's going well, yeah, 2 to 3 months. Things, however, are not often going well.
I was about to say, it seems like life gets in the way a good bit. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's um, shakeups in the publishing industry you've mentioned. Sometimes it's shakeups in your own life. Um, do you find yourself? I'm not sure exactly how to word this, so I'm just going to say it. Do you kind of find yourself kind of working your life and writing around all the big and small disasters that kind of try to get in your way as you're just trying to have fun writing?
Trying to. I used to do most of my writing at work at the psych facility on the overnights.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, it was really never up to me how the night was going to go.
Right.
Some nights it would be totally quiet and I wouldn't see anybody. Some nights the whole house would be up and we'd have fire alarms and 911 calls. And so I hear other writers talk about having their set routine, and I was always like, damn, that must be nice. For me, it's always been a sort of take it where you can get it.
Okay.
That might be changing now, but again, it's still not up to me.
Right.
I've moved to California to live with and support my mom,
Yeah.
who's currently in the hospital. So I don't know what kind of a routine we'll settle into once she's here. So again, it's just always sort of I have to take it as it comes and
Yes.
roll with it.
Do you think those, I guess, life in flux kind of moments where you're kind of having to write when you have an opportunity, has that influenced the way that you write or the content or any of that, you think?
Sometimes there are there are types of scenes that are a lot more difficult to write with other distractions going on.
Yeah.
Um, Smut, for instance. I have to be in the right mindset
Yeah.
in order to do an effective Smut scene. And when you got all sorts of distractions and everything else going on, it's like this is not going to help with the mood, you know. Um, Usually, though, I have several irons in the fire, um, and if I'm not in the right mental place to work on one project,
Mm-hmm.
I've got other things I can work on. I'm still doing book reviews. I'm taking on edit gigs for other people. So there's always something that I can be working on or thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Uh, if you had your druthers, would you be setting up a routine? Would you be working on one thing all the way through till it was finished? Like with with if you could make your own bubble, is that kind of where you would go, or do you think you would still kind of be just all over the place when you got to it?
Well, the past couple of weeks with mom in the hospital, that's sort of what I'm doing. Um, I am having to balance, her stuff and house stuff with writing. But yesterday, for instance, I designated a writing day.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, we're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to worry about chores or estate sales or whatever.
Right.
And and yeah, that was really nice. It was just me, the cats. It was quiet. I got 3 of my 666 word segments done on Warlock. I was like, yeah, that I would like being able to do that every day, and that would be the goal.
That would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been great talking to you. I'm looking forward to Trenchmouth coming out. Of course, I've already read it, but having other people experience that too, because again, it's a, it's I guess a subgenre that people are seeing a lot of, but I do think you've done something special with it. So it'll be kind of cool to see if other people like it as much as I do.